Hi, and welcome back to my channel, The Bigger Picture. And so I want to continue on a new topic, and it's called the United States debt crisis. I'm focusing on this topic because it's like the elephant in the room. This topic, you will never hear any politician spend too much time on our national debt crisis. And I am not going to go into charts and all these other things. As you could see on the screen, I have the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And in this document, which I have told you guys that this document has been around some time, it's just that it explains a lot of the things that are going on today. And so you might not be aware of the reason why our government is going through a national debt crisis. And so in this article, which is the protocol number 21, it's going to explain the reason for us constantly getting into debt and our debt keep rising year after year, regardless of whosoever is president. So I'm going to get into it and just understand that this is set in motion to eventually collapse. Because the reality is not to scare you, the reality is to educate you so you could understand the reason why we are going into severe depression, to understand why inflation and some of the things that are going on within our economy. This is the reason why. So here I'm going to go through protocol number 21. And like I said, this document you could Google online, the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It's about 23 or 24 protocols. And like I said, it's a little difficult read, but you can read it over for yourself, and then you'll get an idea. If you do some research, it starts making sense. Let's get into it. So it says, to what I reported to you at the last meeting, I shall now add a detailed explanation of internal loans. What are internal loans? Well, if you understand how our government borrows money, we borrow money internally, which is mean from our um, businesses, our citizens, various ways internally we borrow money to fund government projects, so on and so forth. And then you have external loans, which is loans that we borrowed from other countries or businesses that reside outside of the United States or the US, right? So of foreign loans, I shall say nothing more, because they have fed us with the national monies of the Goyim. And like I explained to you, Goyim is a term that is used to describe uh, anyone else that is not a Jew or outside of the Jewish ethnicity, right? They call Goyim. It's a word that is called cattle in a sense. So but for our state, there will be no foreigners, that is nothing external. So they just describe it when they come into their power. There will be no such um, external loans, because it's going to explain further down what the internal and the external loans is doing to our economy. It's destroying you and it's destroying me. Okay? Two, we have taken the advantage of the venality of administrators. So what is venality? Meaning that a person ability to be compromised for money, right? They'll lower their morals. They'll do things for money. Okay, that's what venality means. You could look that up. But of administrators, meaning people that oversee our debt, the spending, the managers, these are the administrators that's running the country, right? The venality of administrators and slackness of rulers to get our money twice, thrice, and more times over. Twice mean 2 times, thrice mean 3 times, and more times over. So in other words, they bribe and they take advantage of people that are in power or administrators that are supposed to be doing about the public business, their venality, meaning that they bribe them with money or their ability to receive money for whatever compensation or whatever deemed necessary. Read between the lines when I'm saying that. Okay? It says, by lending the Goy governments money which were not at all needed by the states. So they're saying they lend money to the government which was necessarily not needed. Could anyone do the like in regard to us? Therefore, I shall only deal with the details of internal loans. So like I said, internal loans is when our government borrow from us, the citizen, corporation that are internal within the United States. 3. So here's the example of why our national debt is going to continue to rise until it implodes. It's not to scare you, but for you to understand this is already set in motion. That's why we're $35 trillion in debt and continue to rise. This is how it works. State announced that such a loan is to be concluded and an open subscription for their own bills of exchange. So in other words, the government will announce it's funding a project or whatever, or they need this loan. And so in other words, they created a bond or a treasury bill. Okay, in exchange, you have investors that will show up at these auctions, right? And the government will issue treasury bills at a certain interest rate. And so investors will show up to purchase these bonds or these treasury bills. That is for their interest-bearing paper, like I said, that they may be within the reach of all the price is determined at from 800 to 1,000, because normally these treasury bills or bonds or whatever is denominated from $100 to $1,000. And it says, and a discount is made for the earliest subscribers. So those who get in early, those investors who get in early get a discount, a premium on the interest rate for these treasury bills or for these bonds. So these are your earliest subscribers, those who try to get in first before everyone else. It says the next day by artificial means. So from the day these bonds or these treasury bills is announced, the earliest people get in, get a discount. But then the next day, the price of them goes up. The alleged reason being that everyone is rushing to buy them. So what they're doing, notice it says the allege, because the idea is that you're creating an artificial demand for those treasury bills. Doesn't necessarily mean that folks show up to purchase, but you're creating an artificial demand. Or it could be a demand. But since it says alleged reason that everyone is rushing in to buy them, it says in a few days the treasury safes are, as they say, overflowing, and there's more money than they could do with. Then it says, why then take it? In other words, the next day, there's an artificial demand that's created, people rushing in to get in, and so now they have more money than what they initially needed. So then it says the subscription, it is alleged, covers many times over the issue total of the loan. So whatever they originally seek to get to fund whatever project or whatever by whatever means they need the money for, the amount of people that shows up, they have now more money than what they initially need. So it says, in this lies the whole stage effect. And they say, look you, they say what confidence is shown in the government bills of exchange? So this is what the administrators, the people that's overseeing our government, that's running our government, that's borrowing this money, they say, look, we have so many people show up. We have so much confidence in our government treasury bills, our government bonds. You know, people love our bonds. And so we even got more money than what we really need. And so it says, but when the comedy is played out, there emerges the fact that a debit and an exceedingly burdensome debit has been created because now they got more than really what they need. So an exceedingly burdensome debit has been created. For the payment of interest, it becomes necessary to have recourse to new loans. Absolutely. Because for the payments of interest, now you're going to borrow more and it's going to need more money. It's going to need more interest payment, right? And so you're going to have to borrow even more to cover the interest on the payments. That's the cycle that our government. Notice that um, this annual um, between the senators and the House of Representatives, where you'll have this debate about the debt ceiling. Notice that every year they keep raising it and raising it, and so you have the dog and pony show every year. They pretend as if um, there's some issues or there's some problems, and so right at the final hour, before it struck midnight, they come up with a deal. The fact is, there was always a deal. It's just that they have to pretend to the masses that they're actually trying to do something and they're trying to solve a problem. But the real issue is that they can't stop spending because it's a cycle. It's like a snake eating its tail, right? They can't stop because they have already set this thing in motion. They have already created this thing and it's not going to stop. So here we go. Forget my place here. So it says, for the payment of interest, it becomes necessary to have recourse of new loans, which do not swallow up, but only add to the capital debt. And when this credit is exhausted, it becomes necessary by new taxes to cover not the loan, but only the interest on it. So if you ever hear the talking points about paying down the debt and all of that stuff, that is not happening because every president that you see, the debt just only increased and it's doubling every 8 years, roughly. Goes from 10 trillion to 20 trillion, 8 years. So there's no paying off the principal, they're just paying money against the interest on the loan. Because that's why it says, but only the interest on it. These taxes are debit employed to cover a debit. So when they raise taxes, it's a debit to cover a debit. New loans taken out to cover the interest payment on existing loans, but the principal never reduce. That's why, again, you notice that our debt or national debt continue to rise, regardless of whosoever become president. And like I said, guys, that's the real elephant in the room. Whatever other talking points, that's the real killer for the United States. That's the killer that's killing the economy in which you and I are trying to live. It's the reason why we have very high inflation. I mean, one of the reason, one of the serious reasons. There's other reasons, of course, but our national debt, is really becoming a problem for many of us. So 5, it says, later come the time for conversion, but they diminish the payment of interest without covering the debt. So in other words, when these bonds or these treasury bills, when it's time, when they reach maturity, the only thing that happen is they diminish the interest payment, but the principal stay in place. And it's going to explain why it stay in place. And besides, they cannot be made without the consent of the lender, because the investor who is lending our government, and this is internally now, who's lending our government money, when it's time for that maturity of the bond or treasury bill and they're supposed to receive the principal back, so they can decide whether they want to roll that over or and continue receiving interest payment, or they can decide to get their money back. So it says, on announcing a conversion, a proposal is made to return the money to those who are not willing to convert their paper. So those who want their principal back after receiving interest payment, so they will announce, okay, who want to receive their principal back and who wants to just continue receiving interest payment. And those who are willing to continue, well, they just continue making interest payment. But it says if everybody express his unwillingness and demand his money back, the government will be hoist on their own petard and would be found insolvent and unable to pay the proposed sum. So guys, this is very crucial. It is saying here that if everyone demands to get their money back, what will happen is our government will be insolvent. So sometimes it's necessary, to uh, give an extra interest on the payment upon conversion, and so it will entice that person to continue just receiving interest payment instead of getting their principal back, or instead of converting their treasury bill, you know, because the government is on the hook should anyone decided that they need their money back. And this is what this is saying. Remember, guys, this is the protocols of the elders of Zion is telling you exactly how it's working today. It's giving you an explanation. So it says, by good luck, the subjects of Goy government, knowing nothing about financial affairs, have always preferred losses on exchange and diminution of interest to the risk of new investment of their money. So here what he's saying, that our government, these administrators, they prefer losses on exchange, right? Instead of converting those um, treasury bills on these exchanges, and diminution of interest. So whenever you see um, Mr. Powell there, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and they're manipulating interest rate. And interest rate is going up, interest rate is going down. We're raising interest rate, we're lowering interest rate. Now, when they say, okay, we're going to lower interest rate, it's really to help the government finance the national debt. Now, they will spin it off to say that this is for stimulating the economy because that sounds better, but truly and really, it is for helping our government finance the debt because they prefer diminution means the lowering of interest rate, and like it says here, to the risk of new investment of their money, and have thereby many a time enabled these governments to throw off their shoulders a debit of several millions. So, in other words, when they take interest rate down from 6% and they lower interest rate a quarter point, or when you're talking about trillions of dollars, you're talking about billions and even trillions now in interest rate payment. So when they lower interest rate, the only thing that does is lower the interest that they have to pay in millions and billions of dollars. It lowers that payment, right? Because that's what they're paying. But the principal never changes. The principal never goes down. It says nowadays with external loans, these tricks cannot be played by the goyim. In other words, with money that we borrow from like external, meaning like businesses or government outside the U.S., like China and Japan, it is saying that These tricks cannot be played, for they know that we shall demand all our money back. Okay? All our money back, and will expose us as bankrupt. That's what it's talking about. It said, in this way, in acknowledged bankruptcy, will best prove to the various countries the absence of any means between the interests of the people and of those who rule them. So, in other words, what it's saying is that if we demand our money back, the people will realize that our administrators, the people that's overseeing, managing our government and the national debt, we will wake up, in other words, and we will realize that these people never had our best interests at heart. Or, in other words, we are bankrupt. It is saying that our government is bankrupt. So it says in 8, I beg you to concentrate your particular attention upon this point and upon the following. Nowadays, all internal loans are consolidated by so-called flying loans. That is such as have terms of payment more or less than a year. So these are short-term loans that they are using to finance and paying this interest just to keep things going because the principal is not being touched. So they're borrowing these short-term loans, like a 1-year treasury, or you have a 5-year treasury, 10-year treasury, even up to 20 years. But it's mostly like the smaller terms, right? It says nowadays all internal loans are consolidated by so-called flying loans, that is, such have terms of payment more or less near. These debt consists of money paid into savings bank and reserve fund, but if left for long at the disposition of government, these funds evaporate in the payment of interest on foreign loans and are placed by the deposit of equal amount of rent, equal amount of payment. So in other words, they use these small loans to fund the interest, right? That's what basically it's saying. And then it says, and these last, it is which patch up all the leaks in the state treasuries of the Goyim. So it's saying is these flying loans, these short-term loans, is what patch up the leaks, meaning that it's like a dike and it's leaking. And so they make these little small loans called flying loans to patch up these leaks so that we don't see them. So when you hear they're doing things like quantitative easing and all these little maneuvers that they're taking, a lot of us don't understand what's going on, but technically that is what's happening behind the scene. It's to patch up the leaks. It's obvious they're not going to tell us that because, of course, they don't want to incite panic. But I want continuation, you guys just got cut off there. We also have this right here, which you guys are familiar with. It's called the National Debt Clock. And so most of you guys are already familiar with the National Debt Clock. Now you could see to the the upper left-hand corner, it tells you what the U.S. national debt is. 35 trillion 828 billion and counting, 317 million, right? It keeps going up. But here's something interesting. It says debt per citizen. So each citizen, man, woman, child, you name it, if you're human, you owe $106,121. That is what your share is. But because it's not every citizen that is working and contributing and paying tax, the real debt per taxpayer is $271,800. 888. And these numbers could be more or less. But understand this, that if you're working, your share really and paying tax, your share really is 271,888. Now, guys, um, who has that money? Some of us are not even earning that annually. So how is that going to be paid back? That's the question you should be asking yourself, should be asking your Congress. To me, that's more of a security threat than anything else, than Ukraine, than war in the Middle East. I mean, this national debt crisis should be a security threat to all Americans, really. Okay? Now, here it says U.S. federal spending. It says $7 trillion. That is what we are literally spending. $7 trillion. Our budget deficit is $2 trillion annually. $2 trillion. Now, do you know the difference between um, deficit and what you're spending? You know, when you look to this right here where it says U.S. federal tax revenue, it says that we collect $5 trillion. So if you add up all the monies, including all the taxes that the U.S. government collect annually, it comes out to about $5 trillion. But if you're spending $7 trillion, you're deficiting annually $2 trillion. So where that $2 trillion is coming from? Okay, it has to be money that borrowed, and usually it goes in excess, and so the debt just keeps spiraling and keeps growing larger and larger, right? So when you uh, look at what the actual is, it's a little bit more. When you look at these numbers here, it's a little bit more, right? So over here, you have the U.S. gross domestic product, which is the GDP of $29 trillion dollars. And so if you take um, 29 and you minus 35, that's why we're literally deficiting um, $7 trillion. The same thing goes for here, where you have we're collecting 5 trillion in revenue, and so we're spending 7 trillion annually. So here you have a $2 trillion deficit. I mean, these are real numbers, and as you could see, a lot of red. You could see a lot of red here. These numbers are just ballooning out of ballooning into the stratosphere, really. And here, when we jump down here where it talks about unfunded debt, where it is saying the U.S. total debt and its total interest payment, here you could see $102 trillion dollars. I mean, guys, this money doesn't even exist. It's just you can't really pay this stuff off. Look at student loan debt, which is almost $2 trillion. It's about to explode. And so as we scroll down here, they have literally added more stuff to this uh, debt clock. But what is going to be a crisis situation really soon is if you look at, let me see, the U.S. trade deficit, you could see that we're at over $1 trillion, and U.S. debt held by foreign countries is about $8 trillion. So as you could see, a lot of foreign countries hold the debt to the United States. And so remember what I was reading to you about in the elders, the protocols of Zion, about the foreign debt and about internal debt. And they were only focusing on the internal debt. So the problem, guys, is very, very severe. Very, very severe. Now, if I scrolled up here, it'll tell you what the budget for Medicare, Social Security, And defense is showing you that we're spending $938 billion annually on defense. We most likely spend more money than the GDP of many countries in terms of defense and military. Now, here you could see U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio, and as you could see in the 60s, it was 52%. Now in the 80s, it was 34%, so it went down some, but starting in 2000, it starts to increase, and now we are over 122% when it comes to debt to GDP. So this is something really, really bad, really serious that each individual citizen has to reckon with someday. Now, finally, what I'm going to share with you is a short video of what it looks like when you have $2 trillion in debt. I'm going to share that with you. Do you remember her reaction when she first opened her father PS4? Nothing makes me happy to see all the fathers understand this moment. They are worth more than money. That's $1 trillion. So just imagine $2 trillion. It's literally double that, what you're looking at. Look at the scale, the magnitude. All right, guys, I just want to show you that brief excerpt. Again, like, subscribe, and share this channel. And like I said in my other videos, I have many, many more information to bring out, so you don't want to miss it. And with that, I see you on the next video.